Hello, I'm Clint with Scottish Clans. Thank you for watching this. I just wanted to go over some of the major points of a podcast that I'm going to be releasing, a podcast episode that I'll be releasing pretty soon on. So I'd like to do these mini-series on clan founders. For me, the origin story behind the clans, both collectively for all of them and individually for unique or particular clans, for some reason I'm just fascinated with that. So for this one that I'm going to be putting out here in the near future, it's going to be on the founder of a major clan from the north of Scotland, Clan Ross, or in Gaelic, Clan Andros. I actually don't know where we get that was their Gaelic name. And so maybe some of you in the comments below is that legit, that's their name in Gaelic, Clan Andros or Andros, the descendants of Andrew or the clan of Andrew, St. Andrew, I don't know. Where does that come from? So for some of you who know that, go ahead and drop that down in the comments. But what I'm going to talk about is not the origin of that Gaelic name for the clan Ross, but rather I want to talk about their clan founder, a person by the name of Ferchar Macintaggart. And I will, for brevity's sakes, refer to him hereafter as Ferchar. So this little video is just meant to be a few of the major points of why I think he's really interesting. I'm going to keep this super brief and concise. If you want more detail than what I'm going to share with you here, then you can watch for that podcast episode to drop on the podcast on any major podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Those seem to be the major ones. My web host is Podbean. I'll include relevant links below. So Ferchar Macintaggart, why is he interesting? Well, one, he arises seemingly out of nowhere. The first time we have mention of him is in 1215, and we don't know much about him before that, but we do know that he comes from an older kindred that went by the name of O'Biolan. Now, isn't that interesting? Because in Scotland, the O prefix that comes from the Gaelic ua, signifying grandson or descendant of, is very rare. The Scots preferred a different naming convention, and so we don't see the O very much in Scotland, but we do see it from the kindred that Ferchar comes from, O'Biolan. And they have ties to, well, there's a little bit of scholarly dispute. William F. Skene has him coming from one place, and another one has him coming from, like, no, he's always been native to East Ross. I don't know about all that, but I think it's cool that his last name originally was O'Biolan, and that was actually continued by his descendants, the Earls of Ross, until the earldom went out of this line through an heiress to the Leslies. So they continue using that last name of O'Biolan, and somewhere near there, the end of that, they also started to style themselves Ross or of Ross, and that became connected and eventually becomes a surname. So they come from and the interesting thing about that also, aside from the fact that they're an O, a rare example of O in Scotland, is also that that we would never even know about this kindred if they didn't have somebody from this earlier clan come up big on the radar of Scotland. Well, how did he come up big on the radar of Scotland? That's the next point I think is interesting. In 1215, there was an uprising in the north where he is in the vicinity of where he's from, and we don't know all the exact boundaries, but the kings of Scotland was of a much different boundary than we're familiar with it today. And the province or territory, or some would even argue kingdom of Murray, they laid claim to it, but it wasn't firmly in their grasp. There had been earlier uprisings in this part of Scotland, and you can read more about that in Outlaws of Medieval Scotland by R. Andrew MacDonald, which is where I'm learning a lot of my stuff from Ferchar, or about Ferchar, also from another book, same author, but called Kingdom of the Isles. And that is, so this Murray place had been trouble for the kings of Scots. And it wasn't firmly within their grasp. And this is one reason, if you listen to a previous episode I did on the Flemish clans, that he planted Freskin, who styles himself de Moravia, or de Murav, or Murray. That's why he plants him and I think it was Barrowald, another Flemish knight up there in the north, is because this was a trouble spot. And he wanted to put people he trusted up there. And so this Ferchar is interesting in that he puts down this revolt from Murray, a rival, kind of a rival dynasty. There's a longer story behind that, but I'm trying to keep this brief. But the interesting thing is that Ferchar is a native. He's not a planted Norman or Flemish or Breton knight that could be trusted up there. He's a native lord with an already existing powerful kindred, powerful enough to rise up and crush this very popular rebellion. And what that does is that a native, it's unique that a native would rise up and do this. And it actually brings this area of Scotland much more firmly in control of the kings of Scots. And so it actually has a bigger impact on what becomes Scotland in the future. So he has a lot to do with that. I'm not saying he's the sole contributor to this part of Scotland becoming within their control into the kings of Scots, but he contributed as a native. As a native who was actually willingly reaching out and accepting feudalism and adopting, he was knighted for this act on behalf of the Alexander II, King of Scots. And so he's willingly entering into this system, of this feudal system. It's not being superimposed, or it indicates that all of the locals, the native lords of Scotland, were not just shoved out of the way and replaced with Normans. It did happen in some places, but there are other examples aside from Ferchar that are conspicuous of very powerful natives who were willingly adopting the system and merging it with an already existing clan or kin-based society. All right, so there's another time that he acted that also helped shape what would become Scotland, and that is there is a rebellion down in Galloway in the very southwest of Ireland, and he helped suppress that as well. It was Thomas of Galloway with a man by the name of Gilloway acting as his commander, his military commander. They rose up against the Scottish king. This area of Scotland had been kind of a semi-independent sub-kingdom, and they'd had a great deal of autonomy, and they rose up against Alexander II once again in 1234 this time. And so in Alexander II in 1235, the next year, brings a royal force into that area, which was ambushed by Gilloway and about wiped out, except for the timely arrival of who? You got it, Ferchar, from the north with the men of Murray and Ross, and jumping down in there and saving the day at the last moment, turning the tide of the battle. Thomas of Galloway and Gilloway have to flee to Ulster, and they made another go at it, but it never amounted to anything, and this part of Scotland becomes more firmly under the control of the kings of Scots. So we have Ferchar contributing greatly to both in the southwest of Ireland or Scotland rather, and the far north of Scotland. A major actor in bringing together and helping Scotland become or assume it's more of what we would recognize as Scotland today on a map. So let me wrap that up. There's those four major things. That he comes from an already existing kindred, very powerful kindred apparently, with the military resources he can bring to bear to squash that rebellion. So this, and it's a rare example of O in Scotland, O Beolan. And if you're a Gael and you speak Gaelic and I'm saying that wrong or said anything else wrong in this, go ahead and throw that and correct me in the comments. I willingly accept your correction because I'm not a Gaelic speaker, but I do my best. Then he suppresses that rebellion in the north and brings that more firmly within the control of the kings of Scots, does it again the same in the southwest in Galloway, and brings that in. So there's number 3. And number 4, he's a great example, amongst others, of native lords within Scotland jumping in with this system, this feudal system. And I know that's a really broad word, and there's huge problems with saying that, like, talking like that's a really codified, set in stone thing. But whatever version of the things the Normans are bringing into Scotland, you have examples like Ferchar of willingly bringing that in and accepting that and integrating into that system and merging it with a pre-existing clan system. Those are some of the things I thought was interesting about Ferchar. Now look at this cool background I got here. It's got the last rays of sunlight on me. So this is pretty cool. This is where I love to be. And I got my USA Kilts casual kilt on here. Guys, I'm going to be coming out I'm really pressing forward on this origins of the Scottish clans online course that I'm creating. So that's coming in the future. If you want more information than what I dove into here in this episode about Fearchar Macintaggart, keep a lookout. I'm going to be posting that. Maybe by the time you actually see this video, it'll already be posted. And guys, if you like what's going on here, this takes time, effort, resources, subscriptions to stuff, so some money. So I'll have a link below on a way you can support if you want to jump in and help facilitate this research and publication. Really, guys, I'm not trying to be like the know-it-all of everything about this. I'm just passionate about the subject, and I like talking about it. And so I want you to think of this as a conversation that we're having that's going to be ongoing. And I've definitely learned a lot since I've been doing this podcast. I'm just now starting to get, this is one of the earlier YouTube videos that's starting to get some traction with YouTube, but I'm just excited to grab more and more people into this and learn things from you guys too. So, but I have accumulated a lot of stuff, and that's what I'm trying to share with you with this online course, because I really think it'll be able to shoot you farther ahead in your study of your heritage, or just something that you think is interesting. So until next time, Marschen Leven Drasta.